send the docx, please?
But you can still download it.
Please just send the docx. It's easier for me.
What do you mean?
I'll send the docx file to you.
Oh, okay, okay.
You wait for it.
I'm not ready for anything. I can't open it, bro. Yeah, I can open the documents.
Does that work?
Yeah. That's the.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. First, we would like to acknowledge the Lenape people of this community. Start off with contention 1 climate. Africa increases France's capacity to meet EU needs for 2025. France defense minister pointed out to protect Europe requires increasing deterrent capabilities and therefore expanding the French arsenal. This requires additional stocks of official and the reactivation of product plants. Continental-side nuclear forces deploy 1,000 troop warheads. Ramping up power would require a budgetary effort in Europe. Hard to contribute the cost would exceed $10 billion a year. However, most European countries cannot afford the app. Bigger 25. European nations face economic challenges, so they will take much more to build their own continental turn. Italy, public debt is 135%. France is 113%, Spain is 102%, the UK is more than 100%. Thus passing the app trade-offs with climate, MAG 25. Defense spending targets would require choosing weapons over climate. A global temperature exceeded 2 centigree barrier at the end of the decade. Climate change is a very real security threat that will trigger a resource-driven conflict, destabilize pricing reasons, and drive a larger scale depletion of green tech and importing P24. EU climate change could very be the key of hitting the global climate goals. Absent reaching the 1.5 Celsius mark extinction, Chris 23. For every additional degree of warming beyond 2 degrees centigrade, roughly an additional 1 billion deaths will be caused, leading to human extinction. Contention 2 is escalation. Russia determined the scope of the apps evidence is line 125. NATO's European numbers are obviously Russia's in conventional air, land, and sea power, with more modern equipment and better trained forces, have 700,000 more troops in Russia. Europe's collective capabilities is sufficient to deter Russia. European leaders sound alarms about Moscow domestic politics and strategic incentives justify the defense initiatives to divert public attention. Ramping up defense spending requires selling the public defense companies incentivized to the dark picture to ensure funding. However, affirming harms NATO 2 links. First, the U.S. abandonment pursuit the independent EU deterrent rationalizes U.S. withdrawal. Rule 25. Trump, despite rhetoric, does not trust the nuclear deterrent for Europe. With clear commitment to extend deterrence, only the U.S. signaled that aggression below the nuclear threshold will not succeed. But if Europe were to pursue nuclear autonomy, it would provide a logical rationale to Trump to no longer invest in the extended deterrent. Any initiative to deploy a European nuclear arsenal would be a perfect excuse to reduce U.S. commitment. Second, nuclear strength force trade-off with the rearmament goal, 725. Europe do not have the funds or technological capabilities to carry out Germany budget crippled by ambition to 50% of army equipment reading the NATO readiness standards. France, like the conventional force multiplied, even if the heavy US spend on the nuclear weapon program, the credible deterrent would still take decades to complete directly with NATO commitments 425. NATO Secretary General will against the EU defense efforts competing with the US-led military alliance, giving the scars funding and personnel. The EU should not start building alternative defense structure. EU's defense efforts were already diverting resources from existing NATO structures. Furthermore, French-NATO imbalance versus escalation 725 continues. Russia's nuclear arsenal boasts 5,000 warheads. This worth the French stockpile 550 warheads. The same mission is doctrinal. Moscow's escalate to de-escalate strategy represents a calculated approach to coordinate accuracy into concession. A strategy the new French nuclear arsenal cannot counter. But even then, France requires it escalates. The deterrence fails. Day 17. France relies on ultimate warning, which is a concept out of escalation control, willing to escalate a small conflict to high levels. Deterrence becomes very difficult, but more vulnerable to preemptive attacks. Launch postures. France deterrence has zero credibility, leading to immediate nuclear escalation. Spec 24. If France were to promise all EU states to constitute a deterrence, itself requires that others had to feel mutually disturbed. Nobody dared to put Washington to the test. Neither France nor can even come close. Nobody knows this better than the Kremlin. Russia would immediately test a declared French nuclear umbrella, would assume that France would not risk a war in order to protect the Baltic states. Immediately to a nuclear crisis, because Russia would see this as an opportunity to demonstrate the East. Europe has any protection, only American credibility, provided extended. Cut the card there. Even small nuclear ship leads to extinction within 2018. If it's less than 1% of nukes to put a ton of debris, lower the earth temperature, destroy ozone layer, cause cancer, disease, and ag, and civilization, or robust first strike from Russia. Third contention is Turkey. Tensions with Turkey and the EU are not stable via OS 24. Turkey has challenged the EU for decades, but recently negative Turkey has been accompanied by bilateral reasons needs to find cooperation. Cut the card there. But exclusion in defense is not an option. Go 25. For Turkey to deepen with Europe cannot exclude Turkey. France has offered extending nuclear deterrence. Everyone said Trump must include Turkey in its security architecture. The act forces Turkey to acquire nukes. U.S. Senate 808. Trump feels threatened by any sort of European defense from NATO to the EU. Less faith in NATO might have significant impact on Turkey's regression on the nukes. They could get weapons instantly through Pakistan. Largely. Turkey could acquire nukes from Pakistan and bolster the defense. Pakistan is tied up with Saudi Arabia when they need to rise. Saudi funded Pakistan. Pakistan would indulge in a similar arrangement. Cut the next card. After diplomacy forcing Iran's hand. Press 24. The EU nuclears can become difficult to credibly defend the goals of disarmament. Okay, you know what? We'll just cut the rest of the cards. You don't have to read the impact.
Can you send Mark Doc?
Yeah, we got you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just be up there. It's fine.
Okay. I'll send more stuff right now.
Yeah. Once you send more talk, I'll start.
Alright, perfect. Yeah. You guys aren't prepping, right?
No. Some stuff right now. Cool. We got the doctor.
Dawson and Bruce?
Yeah, they said that.
Once everybody's confirmed to be ready, I'll start constructive.
I'm good.
Judges? Cool. Time starts now. We recognize the land that we are on that rightfully belongs to the Lenape people. With respect and humility, we acknowledge their enduring role as its guardians. Advantage one of the founding factions, Mers multi-af, the DFD's extremism is rising in nuclear sharing encounters across 125 rights. Frederick Mers wants to discuss nuclear deterrence of France, calling on all EU member states to increase defense spending. Mers Alliance won the election, February elections, ahead of the AFD, which came in second and doubled its vote share to 20.8%. His first round defeat was unprecedented in German post-war history, and it was a small blemish to Mers. Mers is determined to solve these problems that have led the AFD voters to believe they can no longer vote for a German centrist party. Negative undermines Mers, fuels the AFD, and Mers needs policy implementation now. MIT 25 says dysfunction will give its voters more reason to favor the AFD if they have a vital opportunity to show the world how liberal democracy can work together against extremism. Success depends on delivering results to German voters. Democracy is already retreating and would be devastating if the AFD won power. AFD rise leads to devastates democracy. Article 25. AFD is under investigation by intelligence agency the BFE. It classified the party's extremist to repeated effort to undermine the free democratic order in Germany. Evident in a larger number of xenophobic, anti-minority, Islamophobic statements that were made by party officials. Any AFD rise triggers the impact polarization is an impact field of Crib 17 rise. As countries become polarized, social injustice, inequities, and loss of trust define its political movement. It undermines the collaborative to tackle existential threats, climate accident, disarmament, food security, disunity, spells military defeat, makes business dysfunctional. To survive, cooperation is essential. Advantage to the New World Order. Trump is abandoning NATO as a trade-off in the Indo-Pacific, independently causes NATO collapse. Early 25 President Trump and his senior officials have made it clear that the security of Europe is no longer the priority of the United States, want to concentrate resources on its own border, and we're in China. The NATO structure is essentially owned and operated by the U.S. NATO pulls out. If the U.S. pulls out, NATO dies. Outsells in two key ways. Number one is incentive. Trump says in NATO's French nuclear sharing allows the U.S. to have a credible presence in both the NATO and the Indo-Pacific. Two, implementation. French nuclear sharing works as a complement to U.S. deterrence. Orbit 25 writes, alternatives of Washington are binary approach, trust and no trust is of limited analytical value. France's proposal in European nuclear deterrence. European systems upgrade their airbase to allow for stationing of French aircraft that are nuclear armed. Demonstrates greater flexibility in certain policy areas. Europeans would like to see integration to help new capabilities into U.S.-led structures to help ease the burden on globally overstressed U.S. The U.S. would still bear the burden of extended nuclear deterrence to counteract the down in credibility. It spearheads ongoing NATO discussions on score Washington's willingness in long term. Indefinitely primarily to bolster extended deterrence in Asia. Impact one is deterrence. No cohesion solve for critical military defense and effectiveness. Number two, solve through escalation to compromise. 24 rights. Cohesion is critical to improve decision making and indicate the likelihood of compromise rather than conflict. A higher degree of cohesion improves military integration, which leads to greater military effectiveness. Impact two is a scenario. Sino-Philippines escalation, Saturday, but no permanent U.S. presence in 30 years. Big 25 rights over the past years since escalated in the Philippines. U.S. mutual defense treaty with the Philippines, which can mean American interventions. The most dangerous conflict no one is talking about. Chinese have turned into demolition derby, repeatedly ramming the Philippine ships to submit a significant escalation, bringing the battle lines closer than ever to the Philippine shore. The U.S. does not have a permanent military presence in the Philippines since 1992. Furthermore, your military presence is solved for aggression, creates reverse deterrent against China. However, European bulk funding prevents this status quo. Peter 24 writes, in order to strengthen the European U.S.-Philippine alliance, the EU should deploy key assets, military aid and foreign for military funding and sales in the Pacific. Bulk funding is going to Europe. The critical to deter China's military aid. War goes nuclear by 1024 writes, Philippines will be a target event of nuclear war between China and the U.S. Analysts war. Cross out the nuclear war evidence to extinction evidence. Evidence to the polar race, but China's pursuing our head to the Arctic. Our 24 where China's pursuing priorities drawing to the Arctic and China. Opportunity to shape the geopolitical landscape. Subs in the Arctic to China goes to 24 as naval deterrence in the Arctic and synchronization acts in the Arctic and non-Arctic states. Convince states risk of influence outweigh the benefits. France gives the EU access to nuclear submarines. William 25 rights. The first step towards a strategic deterrent will be to train and integrate European officers in the existing French platforms to develop an understanding of nuclear power. Subdues counter China. Land 25 rights. Subdeal between Australia, UK, US is a key part to military standing. If this involves sharing military expertise to countering China's presence. Otherwise, great power wars, severe 24 rights. Arctic competition with great powers, geopolitical, economic, security factors, powers, active presence, war due to high militarization, cross-sector impact of extinction via new war.
Yeah, you ready for cross?
Yeah.
I'll take first question.
Go ahead. Wait, hold on. I'm gonna start the time real quick. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah. On fighting fascism, right? Your uniqueness evidence, it talks about like defense spending, right? Like uniquely about defense spending and how like defense spending will like anger like the German population, right? But it's like the NATO summit already took place and we're already increasing defense spending. Why aren't we seeing like your impacts figured out?
That's not necessarily what the uniqueness evidence is about. The uniqueness evidence says that the current prime minister of Germany wants a extended nuclear deterrence, right? And this is one of the things that he ran on. So by not providing the app, it undermines him leading to the rise of the AFD. That's essentially our contention.
Okay, we'll contest that, but yeah, you can take a question.
Alright, cool. So on the flow. See, look. You say that wait, is there a link that the US needs to pull out for your escalation scenario? Is that your link? Or the US is gonna pull out because of the app?
There's multiple links, but yeah, we would argue the minute the affirmative passes, it gives a rationale for Trump to like leave because he sees that Europe is more independent and he doesn't need to be there. He doesn't need to like spend the money there. But that's true. Yeah, he leaves and cooks and eats her and like.
And then is there a second link that French nukes are incredible, so Russia's gonna test the umbrella?
Yeah, sure. That's the second link. Alright, can I take a question?
Go ahead.
Alright. On like on fighting fast, right? We say that like the A when's the new election, like the AFD to like take control?
By
when's the next
2020,
election?
by 2027.
Are you
is
sure?
That's the date at which they are in.
Alright, I'll say that in the second cross.
Cool.
You can take a question.
So on your third contention is, so essentially the contention is that Turkey proliferates, right? That's the effect. Cool. Also, so if we can prove that the U.S. is spending enough, or not the U.S., the EU is spending enough on both climate and can afford the advocacy of implementing the nuclear sharing agreement, do we win your first contention?
Repeat the question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Repeat the question.
What?
Repeat your question.
Oh, repeat my question.
Yeah.
Repeat the question. Yeah. So if we can prove that the app can afford both the plan, the advocacy, and also still prevent like climate collapse, do we win the first contention?
I mean, yeah. What do you want me to say to that?
Cool. You can take a question.
Alright. So like on new order, like your second contention, what's the time frame on that?
We need to do something now.
Is that your time frame?
Yeah, right now, right now, there's escalation in the South China Sea. Trade-off needs to happen immediately, otherwise,
Okay,
it's
so
at least infinite.
wait, so your uniqueness says that like Trump is reaffirming alliances in the Indo-Pacific, correct?
The problem is all the bulk funding is stuck in Europe, so even if he wanted to reaffirm, he can't physically take action because of the fact that he has to stay in Europe.
Alright, so do you have besides that, do you have any evidence that says like Trump wants to move troops there?
Yeah, we read your Horvitz evidence in case.
Okay, sure. You can just run across.
Yeah, it's crossed.
Alright. Yeah. I'll say call it a little bit small link, but
Is it running?
yeah.
Alright, cool.
Okay, that was 9 seconds. I'll send you the doc right now. Okay. So let me just retype it. You guys want to know word, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. I think I low key. Where is it? That is right. Off-time roadmap. It'll be reading 2 disads. You can flow them on my side, and then I'll be going down your case. Alright, so just to repeat, off-time roadmap will be 2 disads. You can flow them on my side, and then go straight down their case.
Hey, can you give me 1 second?
Yeah, and if I have time, I'll finish the Turkey contention, the Turkey contention.
Okay.
Okay. Start with the hacking DA. French cyber is great. Cyber 7-9. France has become a leader in cybersecurity as more creative firms provide infrastructure for information against changing cyber attacks. Bigger systems and increasing risks. Verse 23. As nuclear weapon systems become more advanced, they intrinsically become more vulnerable to cyber attacks. Allows Russia to collapse capabilities. ICWS 23. Russia's cyber attacks can be employed to trigger a nuclear event. Attackers placing incorrect information and taking control of nukes. Next, NATO DA. NATO secure, Browser 625. After the summit talks, Trump made it clear America is committed to European allies. Trump profoundly came out with a clear message to allies, we're with them all the way. After fragments, NATO and France sharing over the control issues, cooking deterrence. Gauchal 25. France offering nuclear security guarantees to EU members that are also NATO members lead to complexities that are beyond resolve, undermining broad strategic objectives, command and control difficulties, and discrepancies in the threat assessment between EU and NATO, fragment existing deterrence capabilities. On fighting fascism. First, their first evidence talks about defense spending, and that's after the NATO summit. We should already see their impact. Second, it never mentioned nuclear spending, it's just defense spending in general. Third, even in the time frame for the next day of the elections is 2029, they never sent me the 2027 evidence. This means that the alt factors can influence polls during the time which can dissolve the AFD, i.e. merge promoting good economic policy, pushing voters to think that his term was good and so forth. That's true, they can't even access the link. 4. On the NYT evidence we posted, Merz became chancellor 8 days after the article, which means the opponent to create new democratic policy which resolves the link. But even then, it auto-resolves the link. The link evidence talks about how the AFD cannot win in May, however they didn't win in May. 5th. The impact scenario, the internal link postdates the impact which is in any rise in existential. In February, the AFD party rose and their impact didn't trigger from 2017. The internal link overwhelms the impact. On the New World Order. First, the uniqueness evidence 1. It's miscontextualized. The article describes reasons Trump has alienated itself from Europe. It's because they're lazy in NATO and the recent NATO summit solves. 2. It also says that Trump wants countries to pay 3.5% of their GDP. The NATO summit overwhelms the link. It paid 5% of GDP. Trump's going to stay in the status quo. Lincoln, our Rule 25 evidence says that Trump will only leave once passing the resolution. It's the only risk of U.S. withdrawal. The minute we affirm that EU becomes independent, that means it gives the rationale for U.S. to pull out. That's the only thing. That's the only risk of offense. We'll also quote their card that concedes this. It says, on Thursday, Mr. Trump suggested the United States might not protect NATO members that he believed were not paying. And so forth, that's that after the NATO summit, and before the NATO summit, we would argue that it's already solving. On the harshness, evidence is non-unique. First, it miscontextualizes since the only context is in Germany, reinforcement of capabilities, but that's not what we're arguing in the affirmative. But second, disclose solves. Cali 25 says France will modernize one of this country's main air bases so it can host nuclear weapons. The Luke's air base is about to be upgraded in an unprecedented way to regain full control in France's nuclear deterrence. They're already placing air bases in Germany. It's non-unique. Third, the part about improving NATO deterrence is not about the app because it's asking the U.S. spearhead NATO negotiations. The app doesn't do that. There's zero warranty on why this happens. Next, there's also zero warranty on specifically on the Indo-Pacific. There's zero warranty in the evidence that said the U.S. funding trade-off with the Philippines. It just says that Biden focuses on Europe instead of the Indo-Pacific. And also, we would argue that Trump doesn't care about the Philippines and never redirected resources there. But even then, we would argue specifically on the Indo-Pacific. 1. Non-unique. Trump's recent attacks that prompted proliferation. 124. U.S. strikes on Iranian facilities dealt the blow to non-proliferation, setting a precedent to justify U.S. Asia-Pacific partners to gain their own nuclear weapons. Director of the Asia Engagement (MPT) would inevitably suffer a blow. It erodes the norms. And then lastly, that we can just finish Turkey. That you can just go on to Turkey. The attempt alone caused an Israeli first strike. 520. Israeli nuclear program lay in the fear that Arab states would develop nukes. Israel could also consider using its most powerful weapons. If the balanced tip Turkish policy might shift in a negative direction, military adversaries' nuclear weapons could remain a part of the toolkit for survival. Extinction. Israeli strike caused rot and extinction. Every 13. Israeli attack might escalate into global nuclear war. Pakistan enter on the side of Iran, introducing nuclear weapons. Russia and China, firm allies, might be drawn in since oil in a war could certainly cause oil to reach heights with catastrophic effects on the global econ. Nuclear war could be used, and then that destroys civilization in the biosphere. That's that.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a look at It's 147. Yeah, let me think, Doc. Oh, I just sent it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just gonna start on my case and then I'll go straight to other.
How about the VS?
That'll be other case.
Oh, so wait, your case, then my case?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just not those.
Yeah. Actually, wait, a little bit more on it. That was 14 seconds. So I have 59 seconds. Let me resend the document because I decided some more cards. My bad.
We good.
Is everyone okay? Time will start. Now this round is literally over. They conceded the Arctic. They conceded the Arctic argument. They literally gave 0 responses in the rebuttals because the debate should be over. Go to like there's the Lincolns they read on the C2. We'll concede on the defense. We'll tell you that Trump won't leave. Yeah. So there's no offense on that flow. On their case, Top Shelf, they tell the US is going to pull out. That's the link scenario for all of their impacts. One cross-app, the Horowitz evidential case from July 10th says the EU likely works with the US, but also implementation, France nuclear sharing works as a complement to NATO deterrence per the Horowitz and major evidence from June. Prefer this one because it determines the direction in which we can debate this argument automatically prereqs the most likely implementation fiat 2. We specifically tell you the US will most likely speed up the process in a way that's more beneficial for them. Weigh this link on incentives. 3, this terminal defense of the second and third contention. If we win, the US doesn't pull out, we win the contentions. On their first argument in climate, they don't need a single war about European countries would have to proliferate and create no more nuclear weapons. And we tell you the US would stay in Europe with sulfur nuclear deterrence. 2, fissile material for bombs are different than civilian reactors. 3, in terminal 9, the US is already investing. The EU is already investing $800 billion in conventional defense, including not including aviation. Shoot. So document 25, the EU is set to embark on an unprecedented defense spending initiative to mobilize up to $800 billion. 4, they're not unique. Their May 25 evidence literally says it's a climate trade-off and NATO increased spending. This is terminal says their link is literally saying it's happening in the scope. That's terminal non-uniqueness. Then 5, their own King 25 evidence says $800 billion in funding. Ambitious annual target of $800 billion. The EU is on a quest to close the investment gap in emerging technologies. On Turkey, 1, Turkey already benefits from the NATO nuclear sharing as so the EU French scheme will materially exclude or provoke Turkey. 2, Turkey won't do it. They're afraid of retaliation. Atlantic Council 12. Turkey has a history of non-proliferation side under the IAEA instrument and Turkey just want to proliferate. Look, complement the international standing as economic damage relation with the US and NATO. They're dating Turkey, but withdraw the harsh for biggest all inside sanctions. Adopted a conciliatory foreign policy favoring a robust diplomacy and economic cooperation. Even then, turn the impact. Proliferation is good and inevitable makes more states more cautious to start the war. Start war not less. Walt 81. Massive numbers of American Russian war hurt the balance of terrorism and international weapon lesser states to disrupt the nuclear equilibrium. The US and Soviet Union conduct nuclear weaponry makes this calculation difficult because how much damage a small number of warheads can do active use of force and brings big losses on war becomes less likely. Nuclear weapons have reduced the chances of war. New nuclear states have been more concerned for the safety and more mindful of the data than some of the old ones have made likelihood of war decreases and deterrent defensive capabilities increase. This also terminally destroys their argument on like an increase in like Israel. On escalation. 1. Not the US is already providing offensive capabilities to Europe and Ukraine. And law 25. Trump that the US will dramatically increase weapons supplies to the European allies and say arms to Ukraine supplies bound, including missile area defense weaponry for Arctic drills. The US is already providing military support for missile weapons. We've yet to see a Russian escalation scenario. Cut the rest of the analytic there. 2. Turn French nuclear umbrella to deter any Russian aggression via perception and development. Mark 25. Future nuclear umbrella will give concrete form to European strategic autonomy. The visible presence of the aircraft in Eastern Europe could prevent Russia from attacking different countries in the region. 3. The perception link of the deterrence between the act when the deterrence time frame short circuits escalation. 3. Turn. Russia has and will continue to adhere to the prevention of war with a nuclear armed state. Russia can, Con 25. Russia is to adhere to the declaration and reaffirm the unacceptability of nuclear war according to this document. According to the highest level conflict in nuclear state must be prevented. 4. Turn nuclear policies increase diplomacy because of the risk of escalation in 2024. 22. After pushing each other to bring in nuclear war, Kennedy could have found diplomacy via diplomacy in 1863. Diplomacy succeeded in 63 to test ban. Treaty was, in this case, it de-escalates. Cut the last card. Cut that card. Blah blah blah. Go to the. Where did it go? On cyber. 1, we tell you that Russia doesn't have any capabilities to actually do cyber attacks on their DISAD. But 2, on NATO, we specifically tell you that the war won't go, that NATO stalls because the Horus 25 evidence specifically says the US is not going to pull out of NATO. 2, they also don't have an impact on the hacking DA.
Alright, you ready for cross?
Yeah.
You said you conceded Arctic. When did you read Arctic?
Constructive.
It wasn't in your constructive. You started off with. This is the round doc that I have.
What do you?
You
Okay.
started off with.
Did you
fighting fascism?
Okay. Do you want me to open
New
my?
World Order.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it.
And then the polar race. Do we
Where'd you
Polar race at the bottom, yeah, polar race.
Here, judges, if you want to. It's there. Can I have a so do you concede the argument?
Okay, yeah. No. I'll.
Okay, yeah.
No,
Okay. Can I have a question now? I mean, we spent 30
I'll-
seconds on this.
Yeah, sure. You can take a question.
Why is Russia going to cyber attack? Like,
Hmm?
who is Russia going to cyber attack? Like, what countries or like what systems or what?
We would argue that like the minute the affirmative passes because they're like aggressive foreign policy, they would like try to retaliate, and so far that's true. They were gonna launch cyber attacks on like Europe in general, like on the France foreign policy, on like Europe in general. Yeah.
And what does it do?
What do you mean?
What does it do? Like, they can hack
Yeah,
whatever they
it
want.
causes like they can accidentally launch nukes. So like cyber insofar the technological infrastructure controls when like nukes can get launched, it accidentally like launches nukes.
Sure, you can have a question.
Okay. On what's it called? On like escalation. Can you explain the terms?
The terms.
Yeah.
On escalation.
Yeah.
Shoot, I read a lot of terms. So let me pull that up. Which terms in particular? Like all of them?
Yeah, low key all of them.
Okay, shoot. Okay, the first turn was that French nuclear rebellion would deter Russian aggression via perception. I think that one's pretty simple. On the
Okay.
second turn,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
yeah, the second turn was that Russia will continue to like prevent war with a nuclear armed state, and that means they only attack non-nuclear states, which means that when we nuclear share with other European countries, they're not going to attack. Then the next turn it says that nuclear policies increase diplomacy because of risk of escalation.
Risks of escalation. Can you warrant that out one more time?
I mean, it's like the same war as above.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Can I have a question?
Go ahead.
What is the most likely implementation of the plan for the context of the United States?
Huh?
What is the most likely implementation of the plan regarding the United States? What is the US going to do?
In the affirmative world,
Yes.
they're gonna pull out.
Why?
Because we would argue that they don't want to waste money funding a program that they think that is already being sufficient.
Do you have
Insofar
any
that, like,
evidence
the
that says if
yeah.
the plan passes,
Yeah,
they're
the
going
rule
to
evidence says that like Trump, like the minute we affirm it, there's rationale to Trump to pull out.
Wait, but why would they want to pull out of Europe?
Because they're putting so much money, they're putting so much attention in Europe.
Wait,
Insofar
but
the minute
insofar
we
that you can see the Horowitz 25 evidence specifically says they can do both, why can't they do both? Why can't they stay in Europe and go somewhere else?
Yeah, sure, they can do both, but insofar that he can still leave Europe, he's still putting so much attention
could
and money.
leave
Yeah,
Europe,
he's
but
still
he
putting so
won't.
much money and attention in Europe. It just gives him the rationale to not do it anymore. I'll take running questions starting now. Please fly.
4:36.
Yeah.
So how much do you have left?
Around like a minute.
Okay. Cool. Will there be a dog?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
What's the order?
It'll be my case weighing their case. Okay. Wait. Actually, it's a bit more prep. Wait, can I take flex prep?
Yeah, go ahead.
What did you just go for climate, right? No, you went just for Arctic, right?
Yes, because you can see
Okay,
the
okay,
argument.
so the Arctic is the only case you're going for on your side, right?
Yes, because
Okay,
you can see the
perfect,
argument.
perfect, okay. Alright. Yeah, it'll be my case weighing their case. Alright,
Oh, the DA thing where.
no.
Okay.
Right. We'll concede climate, go on to escalation, let's extend it. Russia deserted the squad, however, affirming kills NATO. They conceded the link that, like, oh, once you affirm, like, trade-offs with NATO's, like, stuff. But even then, they conceded the link that imbalance versus escalation. Also, like, France's foreign policy leads to escalatory. France deterrence is, like, is gone away. And also, Russia, the minute the affirmative passes, Russia will test the nuclear umbrella. And so far, that's true. Even a small exchange of nuclear weapons leads to extinction, leads to extinction. Let's go down the responses. First, on the non-unique, they say U.S. is providing Russian providing capability, but we'd argue that's only in the status quo. The minute that the affirmative passes, it gives rationale to Trump to pull out. And so far, he's already putting so much money, he's investing so much time into Europe. The minute that the affirmative passes, it gives the rationale for Trump to pull out. Next, on the first turn, they say France's nuclear umbrella would deter Russian aggression, but no, that's not it. We would argue that it's the perception. They've conceded the evidence that says the minute that the affirmative passes, Russia will likely test the nuclear umbrella. It does not matter. Even if France has the nuclear umbrella, even has the ability to deter Russia, it's not true. The minute that the affirmative passes, he's still going to test it. But they've also conceded the fact that France has a escalatory foreign policy. And so far, that's true. They're still going to knock on Russia's door. They're going to be aggressive towards Russia, cause that preemptive strike. Next, on the second turn, they say, oh, Russia will not fight nuclear states. However, we would argue that no, the spec evidence says that they still test the nuclear umbrella, and so far that's true. We would argue that again, Russia perceives they have nothing else to lose. If France is aggressive, it's on their door. They're putting nukes in their neighborhood. They would think they have nothing else to lose. They're going to preemptive strike. Next. On the third turn, they say nuclear policies increase diplomacy, but the evidence says after pushing it to the brink. We would argue that we're already at the brink. Insofar that's true, the affirmative pushes us over. We can't have any more diplomacy. On Turkey, kick the turn. They say proliferation is bad, but the evidence talks about the U.S. and Russia. We would argue that the escalation is unique to the Middle East. It's not really on U.S. and Russia. On this whole U.S. will pull out debate. We would argue that we're winning the clash. Insofar they've conceded that the U.S. after the NATO summit is more than willing to stay in Europe. The only way that we actually win the fact that U.S. will pull out is in the affirmative world. Because insofar that Trump has the rationale, he wants to move troops, but he can't. Right now, we would argue that we would give the rationale, would give the go to Trump to actually move troops out. On the weighing debate, we would argue that we're winning off of time frame. And so far that our argument's a preemptive strike. The minute the affirmative passes, Russia will preemptively strike. They'll test the nuclear umbrella. That leads to extinction. And so far that's true, we would argue that any of the evidence that they talk about on their third contention the fact that escalation will happen in Arctic, it takes time for that escalation to build up. The Arctic is an isolated area. We argue it takes time for actors to come in that area, move forces there. We argue because EU is a heavily guarded area, the minute that the affirmative passes, we're winning on the time frame debate. It's a complete short circuit. And so far that's true, we'd argue if Russia preemptively strikes every single actor in the we can't even move actors in the Arctic because people are bogged down in Europe.
We have 1 minute 7 seconds left. I'm gonna run the rest
so the order is going to be our case, their case. Cool. It's gonna be our case weighing their case. Judge, there is a clean, conceded contention on the ballot. You cannot grant them any. You can't buy anything else that they've ever said on the Arctic. China's position has the Arctic down part 23. Some of the Arctic deter China goes on 24. Naval deterrence the Arctic signalizes actions. Arctic and non-Arctic states convince states risk of influence outweighs benefits. France gives EU access to nuclear subs. William 25 writes train and integrate European officers in the existing French platforms to develop an understanding of nuclear powered submarines. Subs deals counter China. Lamb 25 writes empirics prove that part in Australia. Involving sharing military expertise to counter China's presence. Otherwise, great power war. Severe 24 writes Arctic competition, great powers, geopolitical, economic, and security factors prove that active presence leads to war due to militarization and that leads to extinction per their Star 15 evidence. Like I just end the round. They utterly conceded a whole argument, no defense. Don't evaluate any responses later on the contention. On to way. Probability over time, for you can always come up with some line of logic of why something causes extinction. On the paradigm evaluation that happened before the app, you have to prefer it no matter how illogical. You wouldn't be able to do that either. Voting causes extinction, causes inaction, false policy, making no material improvements ever. The app cannot win. The next breaks always is more immediate because it is the ballot. We cannot cut scenarios that happen quicker or also further but not resolve them because they occur before the judge votes. Collapse the debate on a coin flip. Part of the reason PF is raising the margin of progress is tech debate is becoming a witness to neg winning weak links. It's a reaction to your DNA. The only rectification is valuing the team as the strength of the team's links. If you're willing to pull the trigger on this 1% chance that this scenario happens, you should also evaluate the significantly larger percent that it does not. On the time frame, China is escalating right now in the status quo. This is again conceded. Their time frame is cooked, right? They say that Russia's gonna attack, Russia's gonna preemptive strike. They're not winning their own perceptual link. We tell you that proliferation is good. We tell you that proliferation is good because we read out. Oh wait, what?
Keep going.
We tell you that proliferation is good. It inherently stops any sort of preemptive strike. We tell you that deterrence is good. We tell you that on probability.
Go to.
Okay. Also on to defense. The U.S. will not pull out crossed by the horse evidence of July 10th. The U.S. will likely work with it. The EU will likely work with the U.S. Also implementation. Horse, the French negotiating the worst is complement to NATO turn from Hobart to major June 25 parentheses because this terminal defense is the second and third contention. If we win that the US doesn't pull out, we win this. All the cases they win for a heavily conceded percentage like a summer. If we win the Russian has they proceed. Percentage we win the argument, they can want to all the turn they say that France will test the umbrella. For March 25 conceded that empirically Russia doesn't respond to perceptual threat. Perceptual link of deterrence means the AF wins the deterrent time frame short circuit escalation term. Russia has and will continue to adhere to prevention of nuclear war with an armed state. Russia adheres to the declaration with reference to the unacceptability of nuclear war. This document approves the highest level of conflict between nuclear war states must be prevented. Look, we tell you empirics all back. Break the clash right here. They say the evidence says it, but we say empirically that there is no risk of offense for Russia actually proliferating. You can't buy any of their impacts on probability. You can't buy them even on time frame. And they empirically refused to invade or attack a nuclear state. Thank you.
Alright. Are you ready for boss?
Yeah.
Alright. I'm not gonna give a new response on Arctic, obviously, but can you just re-explain the internal link on Arctic?
Cool.
Okay, we're gonna really explain our argument.
No, okay, sorry. Just the
Second,
link
the last
how you
boss
link
fire.
into it. Yeah, just explain the link into I'd like to extinction specifically.
Basically, great powers are accumulating in the Arctic, and because of this accumulation of great powers and militarization of great powers, this leads to extinction. And this only happens because we're giving China so much ground in the Arctic that they happen to take control of all of it before it's too late. So we need to do something now to prevent this further expansion.
And the way we do
Okay,
that is
perfect.
French nuclear charge.
Alright, perfect. You guys can take a question.
When has Russia empirically ever responded to a perceptual threat?
You've conceded the thing off summary that says that they have nothing else to lose. And so far that France has an aggressive foreign policy. They're putting nukes on their doorstep. They think they have nothing else to lose. That's why they preemptively strike. Sure, we would argue that if there was nothing in an ideal world, that's why they're not nuking France in the status quo.
Okay,
but
cool,
the minute the affirmative
so we understand this, right? We understand this, right? But we test.
They want to test it. They want to test France. They want to test the nuclear umbrella. And for all that is true, you've conceded that off of summary.
Wait, can I have a quick follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let's go to Russia, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they literally said, according to their own internal document that says they will not do a conflict between nuclear armed states and it must be prevented, why would they start a conflict with nuclear armed states?
Again, I would argue if any country was pushed into a corner, they would obviously preemptively strike.
But their own internal documents, right? Would they violate all of that? Would they violate everything that their policy has ever said to launch a nuclear weapon?
I'm sure if you put a gun to Putin's head, he would probably respond, even if his doctrine said he wouldn't. Okay, can I take a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Alright, sure. So again on the Arctic, right?
Yeah.
what other state other than actually no, you know what?
You know, I don't like new
you guys
responses
can take a
in the first
question.
one.
You guys can take a question. No, yeah. I'm not responding to. I'm not like giving new responses. You guys can take a question.
Okay. Okay, so if you say like according to the Hague Conference, the U.S. will not pull out, like doesn't that also just prove incentive why they wouldn't pull out in the status quo? Like, sorry, in the Apple.
Wait, repeat. Sorry.
Okay, if you say the U.S. is super happy after the Hague Conference with NATO, why would they leave again? Like, why would they do all this work and then
Exactly.
leave?
So we would argue that they're pushing NATO to become self-sufficient. And so far that's true, we would argue the affirmative is the nail in the coffin. If they've already put in the defense spending and they're already having their own nuclear umbrella, it gives the go sign for the U.S. to leave the region because they think that they don't have to be there anymore. You guys can take another question.
No, you can have a question.
I honestly
I
don't have
insist
one.
you to have a question.
Thank you. I don't have them though.
Oh, okay. You want to run the rest for prep?
Yeah, I have like a minute left.
Yeah, you have that.
Okay. We'll just like start it now, it's fine.
All spectators, you have to like be back in your respective dorms by 10, so you should leave now.
Well, we're like right here, so
Yeah.
we're in New York.
Okay, I'm just saying, like whenever, like you need to be back by 10, otherwise we're gonna get in trouble. So
So
leave
like
accordingly.
9:55.
Yeah, leave 9:55 latest.
Yeah. Leave it. We're not gonna have our.
No more.
No, we will give our keys. You guys get to stay later.
Alright, sure. So it'll be my case, Wayne.
Okay.
You have a question?
No, you can start your speech.
Alright. On escalation, they don't actually backline any of the responses, but let's go through them again. First, they said that France's nuclear deterrent would deter Russia, but no. We would argue that they conceded the fact that the imbalance risks escalation, insofar that France only has 500 warheads, while Russia has 5,000 warheads that risk escalation because they have an escalate to de-escalate policy. Next, they say that Russia will never nuke like a nuclear state. Let's break the clash here. We would argue that insofar that they have no warranting, they just said it's in their doctrine, we would argue that if Russia is pushed into a corner, that they would obviously use their nuclear weapons to preemptively attack. It's with any society that if we had to, they put them in danger, they would obviously preemptively attack. Let's extend escalation. Russia deterring the scope affirming kills NATO because it forces NATO trade-offs, and also like the imbalance risk escalation. France's foreign policy is uniquely escalatory, and France deterrence, and then Russia will test it, and a small nuclear exchange can lead to extinction. Yeah, and also they lastly say that like, oh, proliferation is good, but again, the evidence specifically talks about like the US and Russia. We would argue the escalation is unique to the Middle East. That's not really, like, you can't really cross apply it to like the Turkey Convention. Insofar that's true, they haven't backlined any of the responses. We would argue that insofar, even if you drop everything else, we would argue that the spec evidence is pretty clean here. It says that even if everything else is true, the minute we affirm, Russia would still want to test the nuclear umbrella, meaning we're waiting on the time frame debate. Let's go on the weighing. They give you a lot of this they give you a lot of like the reasons why they're winning on the probability weighing, but we give you 4 independent warrants on why we're linking into our extinction impact. And so far that's true, we would argue all signs are pointing towards the fact that our impact does get triggered. They say that like, oh, it's like it's neg heavy, but no, it's not true. We would argue that still 4 independent warrants, and on the time frame, let's break the clash. They've conceded the fact that it takes great powers to actually get into the Arctic. The only actor that they isolate is that China is in there right now. We argue because it takes other actors to get involved in the Arctic. It takes time for their contention to the argument to contextualize. Insofar that ours is a preemptive strike the minute we pass the affirmative, because all the actors are already in the EU. It causes extinction. We're winning on time frame.
It's gonna go my case. Cool. Time will start now. On the extension of the Arctic, China Pacific hedging the Arctic through the Arctic House, Part 23, subs in the Arctic deter China, Gonzo 24, naval deterrence in the Arctic, synchronized access to Arctic, non-Arctic states, convince states of risk of influence, always benefits France, gives EU access to nuclear submarines, Williams 25, training European officers in existing French platforms, developing understanding nuclear power submarines, counter China, Lab 35, imperial proven part of Australia, evolves military expertise, counter Chinese presence, otherwise great power war, South 24, Arctic combination, great powers, geopolitical, economic, security factors, with active presence, war due to militarization, extinction per star. Look, they at the end of the round, like unironically, like to stop the debate. They've literally conceded this entire argument. They give you new responses in the final focus on the time frame weighing, but I'll go over that on that sake. On the weighing debate, if you're willing to pull the trigger on a 1% chance of their scenario happening, you should also be willing to evaluate the fact that our entire scenario is conceded. You should weigh that as 100% probability. But 2, break the clash here. Vote on who links it to extinction on the most likely. They've conceded every single warrant that I've read in summary on why probability win. 1, we tell you the app will never be able to win. But 2, like the extinction on the above. Okay, go to their case. They say we don't backman responses. We said in one very specific response. The Kuhn 25 part is just clean. We specifically tell you the perceptual weighting of the deterrence means that the app can win the deterrence primary, which short circuits escalation. They conceded the turn, which specifically says that Russia has and will continue to adhere to the prevention of war with the nuclear state. They give you one response on final focus. Oh, they're going to be backed into a corner. But insofar, we tell you that empirics solve back. Break the clash here. If they say their evidence just says a perceptual link happens, but empirically they refuse to invade a nuclear state, they can just say in the final that they're backed into a corner. But if Russia themselves says, no matter what I do, I will not start a war with a nuclear country. They will not start a war with a nuclear country. Shoot. Go to time frame weighing. 1, they also can go back to the weight page. They literally concede that our escalation scenario is happening right now because there's militarization in the Arctic, insofar that they didn't give a single defensive response on the argument. We win 100% on escalation.
Alright, spectators all have to go back to their dorm.